The crystal glass of burgundy wine slipped from Lizzy Anderson's hand, shattering against the white marble floor of the grand celestial ballroom like a gunshot. A crimson stain bloomed at her feet. The orchestra screeched to a halt. Every head in the room, every billionaire, every socialite, every power broker, snapped toward the sound, their eyes landing on the woman in the simple emerald dress standing next to Anderson. A collective hushed inhale swept through the gala. Did she just spill her drink? The whisper, sharp and loud, came from a woman dripping in diamonds. How utterly clumsy. Poor Anderson. The words weren't meant to be heard by everyone, but they were. They always were. But Lizzy didn't kneel to pick up the shards. She didn't stammer an apology. She simply looked at the mess, and then a small secret smile touched her lips. Because she knew something they didn't. Something that would unravel their perfect gilded world in exactly 14 minutes. 3 months earlier, Anderson, the tech billionaire whose name was synonymous with cutting-edge innovation and ruthless philanthropy, had done the inexplicable. He married a woman no one knew. There was no Instagram filled with curated luxury, no trace in society databases, no famous lineage, just Lizzy. She worked at a dusty, beloved bookstore called the Velvet Page in the city's old district, wore the same pair of comfortable leather boots almost every day, and owned 7 dresses, total. The news wasn't just gossip, it was a cultural eruption. Business magazines ran think pieces titled, "Anderson's Calculated Risk or Midlife Meltdown." Tabloids screamed, "Billionaire weds nobody." His mother, Lila, matriarch of old money, did not attend the city hall ceremony. His board members sent lavish gifts with stiff, formal notes. The world decided Lizzy was either a cunning gold digger or a pathetic charity case. No other options existed. Anderson didn't care. He had fallen, hard and fast, the moment he walked into the Velvet Page, searching for a first edition of Persian poetry, and she, from behind a teetering stack of novels, had recited a line in flawless Farsi. "You're mispronouncing Khurshid," she'd said gently, not looking up. "It's not a harsh K, it's from the back of the throat," like a whisper. He was stunned. He tested her, switching to Italian to ask about Dante. She answered in kind, her accent melodic. He tried German. She responded without missing a beat. "Were you?" he finally breathed. "I'm Lizzy. I work here. Can I help you find something?" Their first date was at a tiny, loud ramen shop. Her only rule, don't talk about money. "Tell me about the last thing that truly amazed you." He talked about watching a neural network learn to compose music. She talked about the resilience of moss growing in sidewalk cracks. For the first time in decades, Anderson had a conversation that didn't feel like a transaction. Now, standing at the edge of the ballroom floor, the stain of wine spreading between them, he squeezed her hand. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice a low vibration only she could hear. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. "I'm perfect," she whispered back, the secret smile still playing on her lips. She had known this night at the annual Anderson Foundation Gala would be a trial by fire. Anderson had warned her. "My world is a beautiful, cold game," he'd said, "and the players eat kindness for appetizers." She had agreed to come anyway, not just for love, but for a reckoning. The evening began with calculated cruelty disguised as civility. As Anderson greeted politicians and investors, Lizzy stood silently by his side. They would shake his hand, clap his shoulder, and then their eyes would slide to her. The looks were brief, but they carried a complete audit: the modest dress, no designer label visible, the lack of jewelry, save her simple platinum band, the understated makeup. Their verdict was unanimous and silent insufficient funds. A woman with blood-red lips and a gown worth more than a car detached from a group and slithered over. Meredith Sterling. Old money, older disdain. "Anderson, darling," she purred, air-kissing near his cheek. "I didn't realize we were allowing guests to the inner circle this year." The pause was a weapon. "This is my wife, Lizzy," Anderson said, his arm tightening around her waist. Meredith's smile was a gash of white. "Oh, the mystery bride. How quaint." She turned the full force of her gaze on Lizzy. "You must be exhausted, dear. It's so much work trying to fit into a world that isn't your own, isn't it?" Lizzy met her eyes, refusing to blink. "I find it's less work when you don't try to fit in, but just stand your ground." Meredith's smile froze. "Charming. Well, do enjoy the champagne. It's from a vineyard my family has owned for a century. I'm sure it's an experience." She drifted away, her laughter like ice cracking. "This is just the beginning." If you're watching this and you already know Lizzy is about to turn this whole gala on its head, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss a moment of what comes next. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Dinner was a deeper circle of hell. Seated at the table of honor, Lizzy was flanked by Anderson but directly across from Garrett Finch, a real estate titan known for bulldozing both properties and people, and his wife, Isabella, whose smile never reached her cold, calculating eyes. The first course was served, a delicate soup. Isabella took a tiny spoonful and dabbed her mouth. "So, Lizzy," she began, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, "we're all dying to know. What is it you actually do? Anderson's been so terribly secretive about you." All conversation at the table died. Forks hovered. Lizzy set her spoon down. "I own and operate a bookstore." The velvet page. A beat of silence. Then a tinkling laugh from Isabella. "A bookstore? How wonderfully analog. Do people still do that?" Garrett leaned in, his bulk shadowing the table. "Let's be real, sweetheart. Anderson here is worth, well, numbers that would make your head spin. He could have any woman in this room. What I'm trying to understand, what we're all trying to understand, is what you bring to the table. I mean, what's the value proposition?" The air was sucked from the space. Anderson's knuckles turned white around his knife. "Garrett," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you are speaking about my wife." But Lizzy placed a hand over his. She felt a strange calm settle over her, the eye of the hurricane. She looked directly at Garrett Finch. "I bring a mind he can't buy. I bring a perspective not shaped by boardrooms. I bring the understanding that a library card can be more powerful than a credit card. My value proposition, Mr. Finch, is that I am not a proposition at all. I am a person." The table was stunned into silence. Garrett scoffed, shaking his head. "Poetic. I'll give you that. Let's see how poetic things feel in a year." The tension is real. If your heart is pounding for Lizzy, smash that like button. Show her some love. And comment Team Lizzy if you're with her so far. The main speeches began. Anderson took the podium speaking about the Foundation's new initiatives, and then he paused, his eyes finding Lizzy's across the crowded room. "This year we are launching something entirely new, the Global Lexicon Initiative, a project to build libraries, fund language teachers, and connect children across the world through stories." This vision, this beautiful, necessary vision, was not mine. He took a deep breath. It was designed from the ground up by my wife, Lizzy. A wave of muffled shock rippled through the ballroom. Heads whipped toward her. She designed it? The bookstore girl? The whispers were immediate, venomous. "This is a publicity stunt. He's lost his mind. She'll run it into the ground in a week." Anderson's voice cut through. "Lizzy, would you share a few words about the vision?" It was a curveball. This wasn't in her plan. Her stomach lurched. Every judgmental eye in the room was a weight upon her. She stood, her legs feeling like water, and walked the endless distance to the podium. The silence was deafening, hungry. She reached the microphone, gripped the sides of the wooden lectern, and looked out. She didn't see allies. She saw a sea of skeptics. She took a breath, and her voice, clear and steady, broke the silence. "Thank you, Anderson," Lizzy began, her voice amplifying through the grand hall. "I know what you're all thinking. Who is she? What could she possibly know about global initiatives or philanthropy?" She paused, letting the uncomfortable truth hang in the air. "You're right. I don't know about yacht maintenance or stock portfolios or how to negotiate a merger. A few nervous titters. I grew up in a small apartment in the Brookside district. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the heat on. There was no money for tutors, for fancy schools, for enrichment programs. But there was a public library 3 blocks away, and it was free." She leaned into the mic, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "That library was my palace. Those books were my passports. I taught myself French from grammar textbooks discarded by a private school. I learned Italian by watching old films with subtitles. I picked up German from language tapes I found at a garage sale. I didn't do it to impress a billionaire. I did it because I was hungry to understand the voices of the world, to hear its stories in its original tongue." The room was growing quieter, the earlier disdain softening into mere puzzlement. "This initiative isn't about throwing money at a problem. It's about handing a key to a child who feels locked out. It's about giving them the tools to write their own story in their own voice. It's the understanding that the most dangerous poverty isn't a lack of money, but a lack of means to be heard. She saw a few people actually listening, their heads tilted. Others, like Meredith and Garrett, wore masks of bored impatience. Some of you think I married Anderson for his money, that I'm a social climber, a gold digger. She said the words calmly, stripping them of their power, and you're welcome to think that. But I know the truth. I know I walked into this room tonight with the only currency that ever truly matters, my own mind. And I know that real partnership isn't about what you can take from someone, but what you can build together. She stepped back from the microphone. Thank you. For a second there was silence. Then Anderson started clapping, loud and solid from the front. A smattering of applause followed, more polite than enthusiastic, but it was there. As she walked back to her seat, the whispers had changed tone. She's articulate. It's a nice sentiment, I suppose. Still a dreamer, nothing practical. The dinner concluded, and the gala moved into the networking hour, the true battlefield where fortunes were made and broken over canapes and champagne. Lizzy felt a hand clamp onto her arm, nails digging in just enough. It was Meredith Sterling. A very moving performance, dear, Meredith hissed, her perfume suffocating. You really had them going for a minute. But let's be crystal clear. Giving a sweet little speech doesn't change anything. You can put a library card in a hand, but you can't put class in a bloodline. You will never be one of us. Lizzy gently but firmly extracted her arm. She looked Meredith directly in her icy blue eyes. Meredith, you are absolutely right, Lizzy said, her voice a soft, unwavering contrast to Meredith's venom. I will never be one of you. I will never measure a person's soul by their zip code. I will never confuse generosity with a transaction. And I will never, ever be afraid of a woman who uses her family's century-old money as a personality trait. Meredith's face blotched with red fury. She opened her mouth to retort but was interrupted by a flustered event coordinator. Miss Sterling, thank goodness, the delegation from Kyoto. They're here for the cultural exchange signing, but their interpreter's flight was canceled. We have no one who speaks Japanese. Mr. Anderson is expecting to finalize the partnership tonight. The coordinator was wringing her hands. Meredith paled. I don't find someone. Anyone. The coordinator looked desperate. There is no one. We've called every agency. Lizzy took a small step forward. Sumimasen, she said, her voice clear. The coordinator and Meredith stared at her. Lizzy continued in fluent, polite Japanese. If it would be of assistance, I would be honored to facilitate the introduction. My name is Lizzy Anderson. Please allow me to welcome our guests. She gave a slight, respectful bow of her head toward the stunned coordinator, then turned and walked toward the group of confused Japanese executives standing near the entrance. You are not going to want to miss what happens next. The look on Meredith's face is priceless. If you're enjoying this moment of triumph, hit subscribe right now and let me know in the comments where in the world you're joining us from. What followed was a quiet, stunning dismantling of every assumption in the room. Lizzy greeted the delegates with perfect formal Japanese, apologizing for the confusion and guiding them toward Anderson. She didn't just translate. She explained cultural nuances, made polite jokes that had the delegates laughing, and seamlessly integrated their concerns into the conversation with Anderson. The signing ceremony, which could have been a disaster, became a highlight. A crowd began to gather, watching the woman in the emerald dress hold court in a language none of them understood. As the Japanese group moved on, the Italian trade minister who had been observing approached. Una bella sorpresa, signora. Il suo giapponese impeccabile, he said with a smile. A lovely surprise, madam. Your Japanese is impeccable. Lizzy switched effortlessly. Grazie mille, ministro. In verità, ho imparato l'italiano guardando I film di Fellini. Mi ha insegnato più la poesia dell'immagine che qualsiasi libro di testo. Thank you very much, minister. In truth, I learned Italian watching Fellini films. The poetry of the images taught me more than any textbook. The minister's eyes lit up and they launched into a rapid-fire discussion about neorealism versus modern cinema. A group of German investors, hearing the fluid Italian, wandered over. One commented in German to his colleague, "She's full of surprises. I wonder if it's just a parlor trick." Lizzy turned to him, her expression mild, and replied in crisp, accentless German, "Kein Trick, Herr Vogel. Nur ein großes Interesse an der Art und Weise, wie Menschen denken. Ihre Analyse des europäischen Techmarks in der Financial Times letzte Woche war übrigens brillant." Sie haben den regulatorischen Engpass völlig richtig erkannt. No trick, Mr. Vogel, just a deep interest in how people think. Your analysis of the European tech market in the Financial Times last week, by the way, was brilliant. You identified the regulatory bottleneck perfectly. The man, Herr Vogel, actually staggered back a step, his mouth agape. This is the moment everything changes. If you're loving this multilingual takedown, show your support with a like. Comment language queen for Lizzy. The ballroom was now in a state of quiet upheaval. Conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching Lizzy's orbit. She moved from group to group, a gracious hostess, speaking Spanish with the consul from Argentina about tango, then switching to Mandarin to discuss classical poetry with a nervous tech CEO who had been struggling alone in the corner. It wasn't showy. It was natural, effortless, and utterly devastating to the social hierarchy of the room. The whispers were now shouts of astonishment. She just spoke 5 languages fluently. Did you hear her correct the minister's grammar? Gently. She's not a gold digger. She's a secret weapon. Garrett Finch found Anderson near the bar, his face ashen. Anderson, I owe you and your wife a massive apology. I had no idea. She's remarkable. Anderson took a slow sip of whiskey, his eyes fixed on Lizzy, who was now laughing with the French ambassador. You're right, Garrett. You had no idea. And that was the point. I didn't bring her here to be vetted by you. I brought her here so I could finally see all of you clearly. I wanted to see who would offer basic human decency to someone they perceived as having no utility. He set his glass down with a definitive click. Now I know. Garrett's throat worked. Anderson, the Riverside Plaza deal is no longer a priority for my company, Anderson finished, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth. I don't do business with people who confuse wealth for worth. Good evening, Garrett. Isabella Finch scurried up to Lizzy as she finally had a moment alone near the terrace doors. Lizzy, my dear, I am so sorry, she gushed, her earlier coldness replaced by frantic warmth. I feel just terrible about dinner. If we had only known about your talents. Lizzy turned, her expression serene but unyielding. Known what, Isabella? That I was educated enough to deserve basic respect? That's a fascinating conditional kindness. Tell me, do you only offer courtesy to people who can offer you something in return? What about the waitstaff? Do they need to recite Shakespeare to earn a thank you? Isabella blinked, her smile crumbling into confusion. She had no script for this. She simply backed away, disappearing into the crowd. The final hour of the gala was a study in shifted power. Lizzy did not gloat. She did not seek out those who had sneered. She simply continued to be herself, engaging, intelligent, kind, and the room was forced to recalibrate around her. The story spread in hushed, urgent tones. She was entirely self-taught. She had built a successful small business. She had designed a philanthropic initiative that was actually innovative, not just a tax write-off. Anderson hadn't married down. He had perhaps married up in the only way that truly mattered. As the last guests began to depart, Anderson and Lizzy stole a moment on the grand balcony overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The cold night air was a relief after the stuffy intensity of the ballroom. He pulled her close, wrapping his suit jacket around her shoulders. You, he said, his voice thick with emotion, were magnificent. I have never been more proud or more in love. She leaned into him, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a quiet exhaustion. I was just speaking, she murmured. I know. That's what made it magnificent, he replied. He was quiet for a moment. I canceled the deal with Garrett Finch. Lizzy looked up, surprised. Anderson, you didn't have to do that. The deal was good for the company. No deal is good for my company if it partners with someone who disrespects my wife, he said firmly. I will cut every tie, cancel every contract, with anyone who treated you with anything less than the reverence you deserve. They need to understand. You are not my accessory. You are my equal, my partner. And if they can't see that, they are a liability I don't need. Lizzy felt a surge of protective love so fierce it stole her breath. They'll say you're irrational. That sentiment is bad for business. Let them, Anderson said, kissing her forehead. I spent my life building an empire because I thought it would make me feel powerful. Tonight I realized I was wrong. Power is being able to walk away from anything and anyone that threatens the one good, true thing in your life. I'd rather be a happy man with you than the richest man in a room full of ghosts. The next morning, the digital world erupted. The narrative had completely flipped. Gossip sites that had called her a nobody now ran headlines like, "Lizzy Anderson, the polyglot phenom billionaires wish they'd met first." Business analysts dissected her global lexicon initiative, calling it the most coherent, scalable philanthropic vision of the decade. Clips from the gala, secretly recorded on phones, went viral. One, titled "The Quiet Burn," showed her exchange with Meredith Sterling and the subsequent Japanese rescue. Another, 5 languages in 5 minutes, was a montage of her switching effortlessly between dialects. The comment sections were flooded with support. "She's the definition of stay humble, stay hungry." Anderson didn't marry down, he leveled up. "This is the best they underestimated me story I've ever seen." A few days later, a plain envelope arrived at the velvet page, addressed to Lizzy Anderson, the book lady. Inside was a letter on lined notebook paper in the careful handwriting of a young girl. "Dear Mrs. Anderson, my name is Judy. I'm 13 and I live in Brookside, near the old library you talked about. My mom showed me the video of you at the party. I watch it every day after school. The way those ladies were so mean to you, I know that look. I get it at school because my shoes are from the donation bin and I use the free library Wi-Fi to do my homework. They call me Wi-Fi Judy and say I'll never be anything. But when I saw you smile after you spilled the drink, and then when you started talking all those languages, something clicked. You looked like you had a secret superpower. And I realized my superpower is that I like to learn too. I love history and math. I want to be an engineer. After watching you, I'm not embarrassed about the library Wi-Fi anymore. It's my headquarters. Thank you for not changing who you were. Because of you, I'm not going to try to change who I am either. I'm going to be an engineer, and I'm going to build bridges. Your friend Judy." Lizzy read the letter in the back room of the bookstore, tears streaming down her face, each word a balm and a fuel. She immediately sat down and wrote back, "Dear Judy, your letter is the greatest gift I have ever received. You have already built a bridge, right to my heart. You are absolutely right. Loving to learn is the greatest superpower in the world. It cannot be bought, inherited, or taken away. Never ever be ashamed of your headquarters. Some of the greatest revolutions in history were planned in small, quiet rooms. You do not need to prove those kids wrong. You only need to prove yourself right. Study hard, be kind, dream enormous dreams. And remember, the people who try to make you feel small are usually the most afraid of their own insignificance. Please, come visit me at the Velvet Page anytime. I have a book on civil engineering I think you'll love. Consider it a blueprint from one secret superhero to another. With admiration, Lizzy." If this story is touching your heart, please take a second to like this video. It helps more people like Judy find it. And subscribe. We have so many more true stories of hidden light to share. The fallout for the antagonists was swift and merciless, not by Lizzy's design, but by the court of public opinion and Anderson's cold business calculus. Meredith Sterling was quietly removed from the board of 3 major cultural charities after the viral clip sparked donor outrage. "We value inclusivity and grace," read one organization's terse statement. Her attempts to apologize to Lizzy via email went unanswered. Garrett Finch's Riverside Plaza deal collapsed, and the news of why, that he'd insulted Lizzy Anderson, spread through investor circles. In a world where perception was everything, being branded as a boorish bully who alienated the brilliant wife of a key partner was a fatal flaw. His stock dipped. Invitations dried up. 6 months later, the Global Lexicon Initiative launched not with a stuffy gala, but with a live stream from the first new library in a rural community overseas. Lizzy, speaking from the project site via satellite, cut the ribbon alongside local children. The initiative was fully funded for 5 years and had partnerships with educators worldwide. In every book shipped was a bookplate with the inscription "For the curious, the quiet, and the brave. Your story is just beginning." One evening, a year after the infamous gala, Anderson and Lizzy were in their personal library at home. Floor-to-ceiling books, 2 worn armchairs by the fire. It was their sanctuary. He looked at her over the top of his novel. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The anonymity? The quiet before the storm?" Lizzy marked her page with a finger. "The storm was always there, Anderson. It just wasn't raining on me yet. I don't miss a thing. Because the noise of the world..." She smiled. "It's easier to tune out once you've found your own frequency." He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. I love your frequency. I know, she said softly. That's why it works. Lizzy's life settled into a new rhythm, one of purposeful visibility. She split her time between scaling the Global Lexicon Initiative and still running the Velvet Page, which had become a quiet landmark, a place where students like Judy came for books, mentorship, and the unspoken understanding that brilliance came in all forms. One afternoon, Judy was there, deeply engrossed in the civil engineering book. A diagram of suspension bridges spread before her. The key is the foundation, Lizzy said, placing a cup of tea beside her. It has to be rooted in something solid but flexible enough to withstand the pressure. Judy looked up, her eyes bright. Like people, she said. The final piece of personal reconciliation came via a phone call. Anderson's mother, Lila, had watched the transformation of the narrative from her estate overseas. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Lizzy's phone rang. Lizzy, it's Lila. The voice was cultured, hesitant. I'm calling to apologize for my absence. And for my assumptions. Lizzy walked to the window, watching the rain patter against the glass. I judged you by a ledger, Lila continued, a rare crack in her composure. I thought my son was being reckless, emotional. I see now he was being the most clear-sighted he's ever been. He wasn't losing his head, he was using his heart. And it led him to you. I was wrong. You are exactly what our family didn't know it needed. Lizzy felt no triumph, only a swell of quiet sadness for the woman who had lived so long inside such cold rules. Thank you for calling, Lila. The past doesn't have to dictate the future. You're always welcome here. It was forgiveness, not because Lila deserved it, but because Lizzy refused to carry the weight of her resentment. Meanwhile, the public fascination with the Andersons evolved. They became a symbol of a new kind of power couple, one where intellect and integrity were the core assets. Anderson gave an interview to a major financial network. The anchor, trying to be provocative, asked, Mr. Anderson, do you worry your wife's sudden fame and this hero of the people narrative distracts from the serious business of your company? Anderson leaned forward, his gaze steady on the camera. My wife's narrative, as you call it, is the most serious business. It's a narrative about potential, about overlooked value, about building things that last. That's not a distraction from our corporate philosophy, our philosophy. We're not just investing in companies anymore, we're investing in people, like the young girl who wrote my wife a letter about studying engineering in a library. That girl is a better long-term bet than any stock on the exchange, and if you can't see that, you don't understand the future of business. The clip went viral, of course. Invest in People began trending. Recruitment applications to Anderson's company from diverse, non-traditional backgrounds skyrocketed. They had, without intending to, started a cultural shift. On the anniversary of the Gala, Anderson and Lizzy didn't attend a black tie event. Instead, they hosted a small, intimate gathering at the Velvet Page after hours. The guests were a mix. A few of Anderson's true friends from the business world who had been kind to Lizzy from the start, the head librarian from the Brookside branch, Judy and her mother, and a handful of educators from the Lexicon Initiative's first projects. There was no champagne tower. There was good wine, warm light, and the smell of old paper and fresh coffee. Laughter echoed among the bookshelves. At one point, Anderson raised his glass. A year ago, my wife shattered a glass in a room full of people waiting for her to break. She didn't. Instead, she broke their expectations. She changed the story. So, here's to changing the story, to building bridges with words, and to always remembering that the most important voice in the room is often the one that doesn't feel the need to shout. Everyone cheered. Lizzy, her heart full, looked around at the faces, real, kind, unpretentious faces. This was her world, not the gilded cage of the celestial ballroom, but this warm, messy, vibrant library of lived experience. Later, as they locked up the shop, Anderson turned to her. Happy anniversary of the great spill, he said with a grin. Lizzy laughed, looping her arm through his as they walked into the cool night. You know, I didn't actually drop that glass on purpose, she confessed. He stopped, surprised. You didn't, but you smiled. I smiled, she said, because when it fell, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of the mess, of their judgment, of making a scene. The glass shattering was the sound of my last bit of fear breaking. I knew in that moment that no matter what they said or did, I was already standing on my own foundation, and it was solid. Anderson shook his head in wonder, pulling her close. You are my favorite mystery, Lizzy Anderson. The story of Lizzy Vance, The bookstore clerk who married a billionaire and taught the elite a lesson in humility faded from the daily news cycle, as all stories do. But it didn't disappear. It seeped into the cultural soil. It became a modern fable told to daughters. Don't worry if they don't see your worth. Build your own library. Learn your own languages. Your moment will come. It was told to sons, look for the woman who challenges your mind, not the one who decorates your arm. And for everyone feeling unseen, it whispered, your value is not a stock price determined by others. It is a story you write, word by word, day by day. Sometimes, the most powerful act is not a loud conquest, but a quiet, unwavering continuation of being yourself. Lizzy never became a socialite. She never learned the rules of that particular game. She simply changed the game entirely. And in doing so, she sparked 1,000 other quiet revolutions in bedrooms, libraries, and classrooms around the world. A spark that started with a shattered glass, a secret smile, and the unshakable belief that within every nobody is a story waiting, patiently, for its moment to be heard. Thank you for being part of True Spark Stories. Your love and support mean more than words. Jointly, we are spreading sparks of light, one whisper at a time. If this story ignited something in you, please let us know in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales of hidden courage and quiet triumph. We see you.